Like Dick said, my name's Alan Reynolds. I'm a pre-sales system engineer here with RightStar, um, specializing in the Atlassian suite. I've got 25 years or so experience now in the IT consulting and solution and implementation spaces, and 17 or 18 now of that in the ITSM and ITIL spaces. So hopefully we're right here in my sweet spot today. So let's get to it. So what do all high-performing IT organizations have in common? Well, based upon a Puppet Labs State of DevOps report, which was based on responses from more than 20,000 technical professionals, they have three things in common. First, they're more agile. Teams are innovating faster than ever and deploying 30 times more frequently with 200 times shorter lead times even. Secondly, they're more reliable. By streamlining their processes and fortifying infrastructure, high-performing teams end up having 60 times fewer failures and recover 168 times faster. And third, they're just winning. Teams that practice DevOps typically exceed profitability goals and market share goals and productivity goals. So let's talk about today's situation. So, oops, one too far. Sorry about that. I'll get it. There we go. We know we live in an interconnected and rapidly changing world, and today's businesses have multiple tools for productivity and communication and work, and of course, new ones of those are popping up every day, especially over the last year or so. The business wants innovation and new technologies and frequent updates to support competitiveness and rapidly changing business requirements. However, on the other hand, at the same time, they also want all their services to be stable and reliable. And as we all know, change is the nemesis of stability. The more you change something, the more likely it is you're going to break it. In fact, according to Gartner, 80% of all incidents are due to failed changes. But who's expected to deliver these really stable, secure services? Well, that's those same development teams that are responsible for creating all that change. So there's the problem. Since the early 2000s, Agile and Lean methodologies have begun to change how we develop software. And ever since then, developers have been tasked with delivering features faster and more frequently, while IT operations and IT support have to maintain infrastructure stability and availability. And customers, of course, want both. So that's where the conflict is. And to achieve that, we need to change the way we handle change. So IT organizations are tasked with balancing business expectations while keeping everything running. And within each of those IT organizations, IT support teams face challenges of their own, continuing pressure to improve relevance of services to the business. And IT's trying to balance the rate of change with stability to ensure business value is provided. And we find that scattered data or lack of information at all levels limits incident and problem understanding. Deployment failures have a high risk of downtime, and all too often, due to the lack of communication, changes are made that IT support probably didn't even know about. Then there's duplication of work and redundancies and knowledge gaps and handoffs, all result in higher IT and business costs. And the feedback from support really clearly often represents the customer's interest really well, but that doesn't always get communicated to and from the development team and the product owners and the project managers. So ultimately, what we need to find is that collaboration is the key to success. So IT support teams are responsible for customer interactions, and their success depends on the stability of those qualities and the quality of those services. And it's often the case that development and support teams have different goals, different methodologies, they work in different management systems. And so over time, they become siloed and due to a lack of collaboration, which creates problems through miscommunication and a lack of shared knowledge. And so we need to break those silos down. So how do we break those silos down? How do we improve collaboration and drive higher business value? Well, IT support and dev teams have to work together, and with all the other IT functions. That includes dev and operations and QA and support and testing, everybody. And the DevOps movement was a response by the development groups to that very conflict, and it aims to bring all of these teams together. And so IT support needs to understand and adopt these Agile and Lean and Kanban principles so they can continue to support both IT and the business services. So let's talk a little bit about DevOps. What is DevOps? So let's dig in and find out. So DevOps advocates a collaborative working relationship between development and IT operations, where historically they've been really separated. Development refers to teams that develop and maintain software products and services. So for today, we'll focus on things like internal developers maintaining systems and tools that employees use to help them be productive, like centralized purchasing systems or CRMs and things like that. Operations then refers to teams that deliver and manage and support those products and services. And so today, we'll focus on IT teams that are supporting internal systems that employees use. So companies like Netflix and Amazon and Google today are applying these principles and practices, these DevOps things, to release faster and maintain a high quality of services. And really, that's the goal. So Patrick Dubois, the creator of the term DevOps, says in his blog, quote, "DevOps is not about a technology. DevOps is about a business problem," end quote. So really, I think that's where a lot of confusion sometimes comes in on what DevOps is. And this, I think, quote really sums it up well. It's not about a technology. You can, and many technologies will support that, but it's about a business problem that needs to be solved to get people in collaborating and working together. So the best way to understand these DevOps is really to distill it into 3 principles that were popularized by the Phoenix Project. The first way, systems thinking, and the second way, feedback loops, and the third way, continual experimentation and learning. So when you cultivate a collaborative culture between development and support teams, you end up shortening the feedback loop that's necessary to drive that business agility. And the functions of a collaborative culture then can be further explained by this first, by these widely accepted principles, these 3 ways. So this first one let's focus on is the first way emphasizes the performance of the entire system, as opposed to the performance of a specific silo of work or a particular department. DevOps transcends departments and showcases the overall value to the customer. A quote from Gene Kim there, the author of the Phoenix Project. So development teams build and then ship to operations, fortifying that customer value. And so this first way is about shifting our thinking to the entire system from the customer's perspective versus those singular goals of any one team or any one given department. So some ideas or examples of systems thinking are like never passing a known defect downstream. So making sure that is documented and fixed or worked around and not just passed along to be somebody else's trouble. Or maybe never allowing a local optimization to end up creating some global degradation that causes a few people to work better and the whole system to work worse. Or just always, in seeking to increase flow through that system. So that's the first way. The second way is about feedback loops. The goal of almost any process improvement initiative is to shorten and amplify feedback loops so that necessary corrections can be made. And really, that's the goal here, is to keep that loop as short as possible, because the quicker we make it, the quicker we're getting those changes done and getting those products updated and those new features rolled out and all that. So by improving feedback between development and operations and support and customers, all those teams understand their impact to the overall goal there. And then we find that clarity and collaborations between those teams ends up breaking down barriers and improving productivity and reducing conflict. And when teams work together from that same feedback loop, those communication breakdowns just really become a thing of the past. It can't happen anymore. So the third way, there we go. The third way is continual experimentation and learning. So this is creating a culture that fosters 2 things: continual experimentation, which requires taking risks, an important part of that, and learning from successes and failures, and understanding that repetition and practice is the prerequisite to mastery. So practice makes it perfect. So this might involve things like allocating time for your team to do experiments, or creating rituals that reward your team for taking risk-taking behaviors or for successes and things like that. So how do we put that DevOps methodology in practice for IT support? Well, there's a framework called CALMS, C-A-L-M-S, which was coined back in 2010. It includes a focus on culture and automation and lean and measurement and sharing. So let's look about applying that CALMS model to IT support. So that the C in CALMS is for culture. And culture is all about the daily or weekly rituals that influence how any particular team works. So the goal is to shift from silos to constant communication. And DevOps is about agility and speed. And so some of these rituals that you can apply to that IT support team are things like daily stand-ups or hack days or maybe chat rooms or Scrum or sprint planning or retrospectives or that sort of thing. The Kanban framework, pulling things through a board. Even chat or IM solutions, used to encourage collaboration between teams. And then focus on results, not just the activities. So don't obsess about the number of changes. What's really important is the results of those changes. So measure everything you need to, and then determine improvement based on those measurements. And we need to understand behaviors. I mean, culture is really just a result of habits. So you need to understand how your teams work together so that you can know what you need to improve on. So the A in CALMS is for automation. So automation works when it supports people or processes that are already in place. And this is a great stride that a lot of the tools are taking these days to be able to automate so many things. And it helps us go from trapped knowledge to shared knowledge, so that like known errors, for example, should be tracked at the time of the deployment and then communicated downstream to support. And support should be linking knowledge base articles and to incidents and problems so everybody understands what's causing the issues. And it includes also a shift from orphan tickets to link tickets. So all teams, no matter which ones they are, should be responsible for ticket linking and documentation. And that's the service desk, the admins, developers, operations, just so everybody knows what's going on. And then link incidents and problems and requests to changes and releases so that you have that traceability. And then, don't just deploy, but support. Continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous deployment are all core to that first way of DevOps, where we're thinking about the performance of the overall system. So your team needs to be prepared to support and operate and ensure their ability to restore services. And they need to know what's being deployed and when, so they can give the right answers to the customers when things go inevitably wrong. And that ITIL forward schedule of change construct can be used here in this one around helping to support. So help with testing too. Automated testing is a key to DevOps, any DevOps environment really. But on top of that, IT teams hold data about various customer environments and how customers approach things that should be continuously fed back to testing. The support's on the front lines right there, taking that knowledge firsthand, and so they've got it, and they need to be responsible for sharing it with the folks who also need to know that. And then of course keeping up with any monitoring data. So support ought to know about any proactive monitoring or of any of the systems that are going on, and frankly they ought to be the ones to provide the requirements for that monitoring up front, in conjunction with the folks who are going to monitor. The devs ought to be involved in the decisions about all that instead of just handing that downstream and letting them worry about it. And then linking those events, back to incidents and problems and changes. So the L in CALMS is lean. The lean approach came out of the automotive manufacturing world, and it focuses on things like eliminating waste, making sure your process is as simple as possible. So what are you doing that's not adding value? And can you eliminate any duplicate work or unnecessary administration or those kinds of things? And then, always seeking to improve. Continuous improvement in IT support, is about constantly iterating on processes and services to deliver higher value services to the business. And failure is normal. One of the principles of lean, and the third way, is understanding if you're not failing, you're not getting stuff done. What was learned really needs to be the most important thing that your team reflects on. So create a ritual of post-incident or post-mortem reports that based on lessons learned they're shared across teams, so everybody can participate in that. Much like a sprint retrospectives from the Agile software development side of the house. Now the M in CALMS is metrics. The goal here, though, is to really keep track of only the metrics that matter. It's really easy to get lost in metrics. So the goal is to figure out what metrics matter and track those. So measure mean time to repair, MTTR, or whether it increases or decreases over time. And measure repetitive incidents and how often they occur in a period over and over again. Maybe measure service level targets in service level agreements and operational level agreements in the context of deployments. And what's the impact of those deployments on achieving your goals? Like asking those questions of those metrics. And then costs around costs. What are your costs per incident, along with the total cost of support? And you really have to take that into context with downtime costs. In some cases, it's going to be a better option to increase support costs to minimize impact to the business. And finally, the S in columns there is for sharing. So when it comes to sharing, you ask questions like, does the organization understand what we're doing? Do we all share that understanding? Are we coming from the same point of view? Do all the teams understand each other's goals and hardships and priorities? Do your team's process outputs flow with other teams' processes, or are those all disjointed in multiple systems? And is what your team knows shared with others? Is it in a system at all? And if it is it accessible by people other than the one team that's using it? And around communication, how are the teams collaborating with other people and other teams? And are there unbarred channels for communicating, or is management for some reason standing in the way of that? And are the right stakeholders kept in the loop of your projects, even if they don't happen to be in your immediate group, but all the stakeholders? And do your IT groups, such as development or operations, testing, support, even the business, do all of them, they all share ownership of successes and failures and learning from both of those? And then, of course, around tool sets, do teams share the same tools and information? And if they're not using the same tool set, do those tool sets at least integrate with each other to help share some of that? So how do we define success? Well, success is effective processes, not just efficient processes. So you can speed up an efficient process, and if it's not effective, it's not going to do you a whole lot of good. So really that's where the focus is here on how effective these processes are. So with innovation, we need visions and goals that they're linked to business outcomes, and from a sharing perspective, we need categorizations and tools to enable collaboration. We got to ensure that the tools work together. Getting development teams and an IT team support teams on the same platform is a great way to do that. And from a process perspective, need to realize that incidents and problems and changes are really just part of an IT backlog. I mean, we get to decide what we fix or when we fix it or what we don't fix based on the organization's needs. So looking at it from that perspective. And improvement, continually improving on service design and transition and operations. So what are the critical success factors for applying DevOps to IT support? Well, common goals is one. It's important to all the teams to understand one another's goals and agree to the same set of goals. A sense of urgency is important. Everybody needs to agree to timelines and objectives, and everybody needs to participate in setting them instead of those coming down from one team or one place of management. And a culture change. We all need to be using common vocabulary and doing things the same way to be as like as possible, so that there are less barriers between that knowledge and those processes. And from a learning perspective, we need to be able to begin applying learning to people and to processes and even to automation. And metrics around what we should ultimately, we need to ensure that goals are set on outcomes, and then that we're measuring against those goals. And then what kind of metrics do we need to capture around that to be able to track what we need to there? And reinforcing behaviors. That one, you want to reward and recognize teams or team members as a way of reinforcing those good behaviors. And a lot of the tools have gamification kind of things built in now that provide a great way to help with that. So like Dick mentioned earlier, RightStar is an Atlassian solution partner, and the vendor provides a DevOps focused platform, which joins both ALM and ITSM together. with products like Jira Software and Jira Service Management and Confluence and Bitbucket, Bamboo. So I wanted to share just 2 success stories quickly here with their solutions and how a couple companies were able to use Atlassian to succeed. Both of them have brought their development teams and support teams together under the Atlassian platform this way. So the first is Puppet Labs. They've shown improvement resolving tickets 67% faster. So Puppet Labs was once a small startup which turned into a venture-backed company with hundreds of employees. And when that growth happened really quickly, they found themselves in a real crossroads and needed to scale their support channels and still maintain service levels. And as a builder of IT automation software themselves, both on premise and in the cloud, they sort of know where those problems exist and decided to turn to Atlassian to Jira Service Management for help. So Puppet Labs IT manager Nick Cunningham noted that since deploying Jira Service Management, they've had their tickets resolved 67% increase. Their resolved tickets increased by 67%, which he takes as a sign that their help desk team is able to actually get more work done. So today, all the employees at Puppet Labs are supported by Jira Service Management. And Mr. Cunningham also noted that with Jira Service Management and the entire Atlassian stack, they've been able to increase their user adoption by staying on the same system, streamlining their maintenance process, and reducing the total cost for labor and maintenance across all those systems. So with Atlassian products, Puppet Labs was able to streamline its workflows and add critical efficiencies and provide the help to the customers that they needed quickly. A second real quick success story here is around Skyscanner. So millions of people book trips using Skyscanner's global search engine every day. And so with all those thousands of searches in that engine happening every second, it's really no surprise that they take defects in that software system super seriously. So to streamline that defect process of those reports coming in, they needed a new kind of service desk. And Michael Hall, Skyscanner's business tools lead, said that they're building better software by fixing bugs twice as fast since implementing Jira Service Management. So today, their 700 employees across 9 global offices are helping improve their global search engine with Jira Service Management. And he noted also that their end user customers actually get email updates from the system, so they know when problems are fixed and they can understand the impact on product improvement and their own feedback and how that helps in that product improvement. So again, with Atlassian, Skyscanner can now focus on individuals and interaction and not be limited by that tool set. So in conclusion, so faster, better service is about culture and sharing and tools that enable your teams. That collaborative culture is what's critical to the success there and taking that DevOps approach to your IT support systems. Aligning support and development can help your organization understand what services the business wants and needs to be productive. So what takeaways do you have from today? Well, first, use DevOps principles for IT support processes and start doing it today. Start by applying the 3 ways of DevOps and comms to your IT support. Do a little brainstorming session with your team and figure out what some low-hanging fruit is to begin moving in that direction. And second, emphasize teamwork and collaboration to get dev and ops under the same roof by a focus on culture, emphasizing collaboration through training, incentives, like simulation training and gamification, like I mentioned, or metrics by measuring everything you need to, and maybe even considering starting with some benchmark studies. And consolidation by moving disparate dev and ops support systems together under the same system is an important thing there. So let's see. So let's take a look at questions that you might have submitted there as we went through the presentation today. I don't know, Dick, have you had a chance to monitor chat there?
Yeah, and now would be an excellent time to submit a question. There's either a chat window or there's a Q&A window, so feel free to type a question in. And I've got one here that I wanted to ask Alan. And by the way, nice job running through all this. And I like this whole CALMS approach. I think it was, I took notes. So it was culture, automation, lean, metrics, and sharing. Okay. And there's a lot of different things in there, and it ties a little bit to what I was talking about earlier when I talked about automation. But there's a number of things, and I know that if somebody was just to say, okay, go do comms, okay, they would say, well, now what do I do, right? Are there, you've been in the whole ITSM space for a long time. Is there one or two things that you can think of that somebody could start out by doing to see some improvement on the service desk or in the DevOps space at all? Is there anything that sort of comes to your mind? I know you covered a lot of different things that you would say, let's try this first, maybe.
I think that putting in some rituals in place to foster team collaboration is probably a great place to start. If none of that's happening today, getting a similar chat tool that people can chat on, or to get a weekly meeting where we can provide feedback and complaints or those sorts of things, or those kinds of rituals on handoff when a release when a release comes to be released, to either before that or immediately after that, have those folks involved in that convey that information in an interactive way with the support team, so that they're not taken off guard and not familiar with everything that's done. Now, of course, they're not going to be able to know it all, but so many times things happen there on that development side on releasing things that support team doesn't even know about. So I think any of those rituals that can get you to start to collaborate, it begins to break down those barriers, and then the real work can start, aligning processes and deciding what metrics to focus on and those kinds of things. But until you get together and start getting on the same page, I think that's really the place to start.
Well, let's drill down in maybe a little bit more with that. I like what you're saying. So collaboration tools, and there's a lot out there. You mentioned some chat tools, for example, on the ITSM service desk. You might have knowledge management. You might have a portal. With Atlassian, there's tools like Confluence, and with Confluence you can set up blogs where you can do maybe internal intranets where you can share information, or you can share documents. You can share resources. You can post different things and pass it around. Is there anything that you kind of like? I mean, if you were going to be the designer, is there one thing that you would say, well, this is, and maybe it's just because you enjoy it more than something else, is this something, would you try to get a Confluence page or two set up and working and get people collaborating? Because I think these are the things that are important, especially when everybody's working from home now. You know what I'm saying?
I do. People can do, planning and collaborating in Confluence. I think one of the things that might be a great place to start is with retrospectives in Confluence. There's a template for that even in Confluence for team retrospectives. So when you sit down every 2 weeks or once a month or however often you can get to do it, to talk about, hey, what are we doing right here? What are we doing that's not so great? What do we want to change? What do we want to try? Who do we want to kill? Those kinds of things. Right. To get it documented and get a place for a checklist to be started. That these are the things we want to work on.
Yeah.
And then measure it over time that way, even across retrospectives, really. That it almost becomes one of your metrics.
Yeah, well, I think retrospectives are great, and I've always said feedback is a gift. Although one time I said that to somebody, and he didn't think it was a gift after I gave him some feedback. So you got to be just a little bit careful. Maybe it was just the delivery. I'm not exactly sure. But anyway, here's another question that's in, and this one has to do with user adoption. It says, any ideas for improving user adoption? And I think we've all seen this before. Everybody hates change, right? And I've certainly been there in government organizations, and they have their own way of doing something. You come in maybe with a new tool which requires a new process, and even though this may be a lot better, nobody wants to follow suit, or nobody wants to really cooperate, because they just want their old system back. And are there some ideas that you can think of to, I even remember one time, because Agile's popular now, and I remember going into a government agency and they were all joking about, oh yeah, we had to take the Scrum-based Agile training, and I think what they were saying, although you read between the lines, is that they didn't like it, right? Because it was different from what they were doing. Is there anything that you've seen or done before that would help how do we use collaboration tools at RightStar? Is there anything that we do differently that gets people to use them all the time, or what do you think?
Well, I think adoption is probably the biggest culture part of any tool shift or process shift, is getting people on board with it. And I think one of the places to start with is to include them in that planning. I think I mentioned somewhere along the line that, like, for monitoring, for example, the folks that that built the software ought to be part of the folks in determining who is going to be monitoring and how it's going to be monitoring when another team's doing the monitoring, because that team that's monitoring isn't the ones that built it. Very similarly, if something gets thrust on you and it's different than the thing you're used to, and you have no choice and you have no say in it, you get grumbles and you get mediocre sort of adoption. I think the thing that we've seen that works the best is to have some real champions on team that comes in to work to make sure that everybody's involved in gathering the requirements and feedback around how all this is going to work, instead of just handing down a new process. And then part of that person's those adoption specialist job really is to help people be part of the process and own it and feel like they own it and cheerlead for it.
Right.
I think it's really when people get on board that these things work. The system itself doesn't do a whole lot on its own.
Yeah. Well, it kind of reminds me, we're in this whole Agile coaching space. And the reason is because agility doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long, concerted effort. And to make it happen, it's good to have a coach there that's I don't want to say cracking the whip, but in a sense, that's what he or she is doing, is really making sure that people adopt to the new ways of doing things, and that person is there all the time to hold their hand if they have to, or emphasize the reason that you're going to do this and show the positive outcomes that can result. So I think that's something that's important as well here. So okay, all right. I think that's the only other thing that I wanted to just mention, and this has to do with the M that you had, and this on the metrics side of things. There's certain benchmarking utilities or systems that are out there. For example, if you're concerned about, are you an Agile agency? Well, there's a service that you can get from an organization called Agility Health that can compare how you're doing to another government agency. And I one time when I went into a CIO at a large government agency, he said, well, that's not going to do me any good, because I don't want to compare myself to another government agency. I'd rather compare how we're doing to a large enterprise that's doing some serious software development. So that was something that was a little bit of an eye-opener for me. But then on the ITSM side, there's also a number of different metrics, and we've worked with a company before called MetricNet, and they have different metrics that they will benchmark your particular organization against, so you can see how you're doing. And you don't want to just get a snapshot of it, but typically the reason you want to have these metrics is you want to try to improve. And so those are some other things that are possible that you can do as well. So I just wanted to throw those out. So that looks like that's about it in terms of the questions. And Alan, is there anything else that you can think of that
No, I don't
we
think
should
so.
be asking?
Sure hope
Okay.
Sure hope it's been helpful for some folks to begin thinking about how to take those things that we've known to be found helpful over in our sort of dev shop side of the world, and bring it over into the more traditional support side.
Yeah, we've talked about DevOps, but a lot of times people, especially if they come from an ITSM background, are saying IDLE 4 then instead of DevOps, because the same principles are applied in both spaces. And I think it was just that IDLE was a little bit late to the game to wise up to what's really happening out there in the real world. So I think that's an important thing. Is there a final slide that kind of shows us how to contact RightStar?
Sure is. Almost always forget that.
So Anyway, we hope you've enjoyed the presentation today, and there's different ways to contact us, as you can see, either by going to our website or giving us a call or sending us an email. So we'd certainly love to have the opportunity to talk to you in a little bit more detail about these sorts of things. And then I certainly wanted to mention that we're doing, and I believe it's Tim's our marketing guy, and I think we're doing a webinar coming up in March. I believe it's Agile focused, and we're looking to, in some ways, to talk about getting users to come to attend these things. It's going to be a chocolate tasting webinar, so we'll be able to send you out some chocolates to taste, and then we'll have a guest speaker on there from a chocolate manufacturing company that will run through and give you the differences and so on. And I think you're all on the mail list that we have, so you should be receiving an invitation to that as well, and it should be a lot of fun. And we'll do that during the day. So maybe we'll do it after lunch or something, or I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Yeah,
that should be a lot of fun too.
It's March 18th at
Okay.
4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. So wherever you're at, it should be during the day.
Okay.
It should be great. It's going to be focused on Jira Service Management and how it's a lot more than just a rebranding from Jira Service Desk, and how there's a completely new set of capabilities that will really enable you to take your service desk to the next level. So it'll be some great information and hopefully some delicious chocolate. So it should be good.
Okay. Very good. Well, we certainly hope to see you then. Thanks, everybody, for your attendance today. Thanks, Tim, for organizing this, and thanks very much, Alan, for a great job today. So we'll go ahead and sign off now from RightStar. Again, we hope to see you at the next one, and talk to you all soon. So long now.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.